Can Boba Fett's sidekick be trusted? Who's scarier than the Pikes? And fans freak out over shiny speeders on the streets of Mos Espa. All this and more on this week's Streaming Star Wars.
Well, thank you very much, ATG3. Welcome to Streaming Star Wars, the lively talk show featuring myself and co-host Nick Milkey from our fellow ATG Cast show, Podcast of the Wills. Every Friday night, Nick and I take to our YouTube channel and we bring you a lively conversation about all things Star Wars. And while there is a series running on Disney Plus, we're going to be making that the focus of the show. And that's exactly what we did this week. Chapter 3 of the Book of Boba Fett dropped last week, and we took a deep dive, got into a little bit of irresponsible speculation, and in our third segment, we really got into the, we'll call it interesting fan reaction to the shiny, brightly colored speeders that were featured in this week's episode. We talk a little bit about Fennec Shand and decide, can she be trusted? We get into the rebirth of Boba Fett and what it means to him as a character. And we were joined by our good friend Scotty J-Ro from the Bombad cast, and we got his response to this week's episode. Before we get started, though, I want to ask you to like and subscribe to the show. Subscribe because you get 3 shows a week from ATG Cast. On Mondays, you get this show, Streaming Star Wars. On Thursdays, you get either Podcast of the Wills or Around the Galaxy, bringing you lively one-on-one conversations with the people behind the fandom. And on Saturdays, you get our 5-minute news digest, Disturbances in the Force, where we bring you all the news of the week with no spin, no clickbait, just to keep you in the loop on all things happening around Star Wars. If you want to be a part of Streaming Star Wars show, all you got to do is join us on our YouTube channel. Head on over and subscribe. The link is in the notes below. And if you want to become a part of the ATG Cast family, please consider our Patreon program. For as little as $3 a month, you can get access to exclusive content, receive swag, and be part of the live virtual audience when we record Around the Galaxy and Podcast of the Wills. Follow us on all your social media channels at ATGcast, and head on over to atgcast.com to find more information about us, access previous episodes, and get links to buy amazing ATGcast merch. So without further ado, I am excited to bring you this week's episode of Streaming Star Wars after these messages. Welcome to Streaming Star Wars number 2 this year. Nick, how you doing, man?
We're here. We've made it another week. We got through all the things we had to deal with, mostly just waiting for Chapter 3 of Book of Boba Fett. And now we're here to have another drink and talk about it.
I'm still debating whether or not I like the whole Wednesday thing or not. It's like nice to break up the week, but it feels it still feels weird to me. I don't know why.
I agree. And I don't know. When we had Marvel and Star Wars both dropping, I liked that one was Wednesday and one was Friday. It gave us a good, feel to spread things out. Now it's all on Wednesday, but this is all we have right now. I don't know, but we get Star Wars and we're getting Star Wars on a weekly basis. So I'm certainly not here to complain about it.
I'm with you on that, man. I cannot complain about that at all. So, hey, we have a kind of a packed show for us tonight. We have, an episode that was a lot more complex than I think people took the time to talk about because they were too busy talking about shiny speeders. We're going to dig into what we got from the show, what we can expect to see. And we're going to talk about some shiny speeders. So Nick, I think you're much more prepared than me this week to talk about this episode. So let's just, I think first of all, we got to let everybody know that every time you show up at Streaming Star Wars, it is spoiler territory. So I just hope you all have watched it before you're hanging out with us or listening to the replay. But Nick, give me your initial reactions to the show. How did this episode strike you?
I will say, I think this was the longest short episode. And I think you said that either at the top of the show or maybe when we were talking before we got started, but there was a lot that happened in the short 36 or 38 minutes that this episode was. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, other than, the stuff we've seen online that we're going to talk about in a little bit. You and I have both kind of made a conscious effort between Wednesday and Friday night to not watch a bunch of other recap shows. And, I want my thoughts to be kind of fresh for our conversation, and some of that we've texted a little bit.
Yep.
But I really like this episode, and I really feel like for being 3 of 7, it set up a bunch of different things.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those things that's really important about the show. And I would love, it's one of the things that one of the interesting reactions, and again, we'll get into fan reactions, but it really is setting up, it is called the Book of Boba Fett. And
Absolutely.
it really, absolutely, I even tweeted about this. It really feels like a book. When you pick up a book, the first, well, right now we're three out of 7. So we're about the halfway point of the book.
Right.
We have set up the story. And if there's any question about what's going on right now, it's really just the things that will hopefully be revealed as the show hits its climax. We know that Boba's got a bunch of enemies. We know that he can trust no one. And it's interesting because I love the relationship between Fennec and Boba, and I feel like they're deliberately set up to be the two extremes. Like one comment that I would agree with a lot of the dude bros who are not happy with the Book of Boba Fett, for somebody who is this ruthless killing machine, or not even killing machine, but bounty hunter, right? His reputation is about ruthless. He is a little bit slow on the uptake. And I don't mean that in a terribly negative way, but he's not used to doing this. So he's a little slow to be getting it. He's trusting. I don't think he is trusting people. I mean, what do you think? Is he trusting people, or does he not know how not to trust people?
I haven't thought about it in exactly that way until you just said that, but you're nailing something that I've also seen being set up in these first few episodes. You talk about the interplay between him and Fennec. Like, she's his consigliere. She's his right hand. She's that voice going, hey, what about this? And it's almost a funny, and it is very Star Wars. Mm-hmm. His thing that he doesn't know about is what they're playing for humor. In the first episode, when the Major Domo shows up and he looks at her and goes, isn't he supposed to pay me? Like, all those little moments of Boba not being sure, because he's always been a bounty hunter. And now he's, the head of the family. And there's so much Godfather 2. We've talked about that a couple of times.
Yeah.
But, the advice from the mayor last week, being the head of a family is difficult.
Right.
We're watching Boba sort that out in real time, which I actually think is a story point I wasn't remotely expecting, but I'm totally here for.
Yeah. And it is interesting because again, I think one of the critiques of the show that you see generally is I think people wanted to see the Boba Fett that we played with in the sand pile with our action figures. Right. And I think that story still exists. That guy right there. I think that story still exists somewhere. I think it probably exists in comic books. It might exist maybe in other flashbacks, but he's in a different spot right now. And I think that's why I wanted to bring up Fennec, because I want to know why Fennec is so smart about this stuff. And it's not because I don't trust her. Actually, of all the characters in the show, if she turned at the end, I think that would be great, because it would be such a huge twist. I don't want her to, but she knows so much more than he does. And he is so reliant upon her. In fact, look, let's get into conspiracy theories and crazy fan theories that nobody has talked about. How did BK get past Fennec Shand? How did he get in there all alone? I'm not saying she let him in.
He hired a gang, a gang of street toughs who are supposed to be there and eventually show up. He's hired, all these other people to come in and do this thing. But you're right. How did he get in there? And I do want to pull up Chris's comment that I've got on the screen. Boba is totally in over his head at this point.
He totally is. He 100% is in over his head.
Absolutely. And I'm with you about Fennec. And I think that, I do trust her, but it would be such a Star Wars move along the lines of Darth Vader or a Baby Yoda surprise, somebody's, to turn on him to, she's very quiet. She's observant. She's paying attention. There's a lot of different things going on there. And I don't know that that's the story they're going to give us, but it's an interesting development. And we talked last week about the emotionally developed Boba Fett. Yeah. There's a lot of paying off, the trade in the desert with the pikes for transport or for passage through the area, with these water punks that he meets in the alley. Okay, you want to, he's forging a new path, and Chris is exactly right. It's his rebirth. It's what is this new Boba 2.0.
Yep.
But at what point does that come back to bite him? Because what we get set up in the beginning, and I have we have the return of 8D8, and he's laying out the city map and the 3 territories, which I thought was neat. But also in that, it gives us, he talks about Bib had a very loose arrangement with those people. And so he's telling Boba, and I think that's when he says they're waiting for me to make a move.
Right.
It's
right.
time to, piss or get off the pot. What is Boba Fett going to do?
And what's really interesting too is I think let's talk a little bit about the flashback in this episode, which again is the first episode that we didn't get as much flashback, but the flashback we got was extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it showed that it may have shown why he's not super confident, because his overconfidence may have gotten his found family murdered.
Correct.
Right. He started this war with the Klatooinians. I always say that wrong.
It's the and the Kintan Strider gang.
Right. Yes. He started the war with them. He didn't even start the war with, well, I guess he did. He stole their bikes. He beat them up at a bar. I guess that's that ain't cool out in the old the old West there. But yeah, he came back. He saw that his people were murdered by them. I mean, their sigil was painted on the tents, so there's no question about it. So maybe that's why he is kind of unsure how to do things. He's, you get bitten like that, and your confidence in decisions are tough. And I think that's what's so tough for people watching this version of Boba Fett is they want the action figure Boba Fett. And again, I believe that story exists. It's still out there. I mean, this is Boba at, in the third third of his life, right? I know in the show, what is he, like 40 something years old? I did the math.
Yeah, 42, like 43.
Right. But clearly he's gone through a lot. And so all those life lessons are now coming into play when he's got an opportunity for senior management. Right. So I think that's what's playing against him a bit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and so we get that opening, him figuring out, him being told, hey, there's all these other things going on. These are the 3 zones of the city. And we get our first cameo of the show. We get 2 really awesome cameos, and we get the appearance of Lortha Peel. We love Tuckerized Star Wars names. If you say Lortha Peel, there's there's something there. It's not as good as Mayor McCheese. But of course, I can't wait to find out where Lortha Peel comes from. But we've got Stephen Root as the watermonger.
Yes. Famous for, of course, the staplers.
That's right. Did you see my stapler? I'm going to burn this place down, which, they set him up in just a way that maybe sometime later in this series, he burns this thing down.
He just might. Yep. Yeah,
there could be a moment in there. So we get that first cameo that leads, Boba to go meet the gang, the street gang, the toughs, genetically modified. They've got robot bits, and it's just one of those, it's one of those interesting things that, who are these new characters? We're getting some new seeds planted, even if it's for nothing else than the Back to the Future 2 style chase that we're going to get later on in the show.
I mean, a lot of people are not sure about that as a look, and we'll definitely get into that in a minute.
Yes,
but it is interesting because it's they're there for a reason. I mean, a very deliberate reason, and that it was a risk to go that route. But certainly, the role that they will play it's another piece to his puzzle, and very much the way Din Djarin picked up Cara Dune and picked up IG-11 and picked up Kuiil along the way. That's kind of what he's doing, but this time it's all in his city, and it's all from a different perspective. And honestly, again, back to that first point that I don't hear a lot of people talking about is he can't trust anybody. He can't trust anybody there, and so I like having them in there as well.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to pull this to your attention and get your thought on it. Andy from Holochronicles has a couple of really great points. He says, Boba is stunted. He was an orphan at a young age, raised by a bounty hunter code that led to a lonesome code that he has developed. Now himself, he's been solo. He's been alone. Not been solo. He has
not been solo. He's not been
not
solo.
That been solo. He has remained solo.
Right.
But also he says he is socially awkward or obtuse. He's trying to project a lone wolf code on a complex social network. Oh, sorry. This is Josh. This is a big reveal. Josh has
that's
shown
the
up.
reveal.
That's right. Josh is using social media to hang out and comment in the live chat.
That
Normally
alone,
it's Andy.
That alone is shocking. That's the shocker of the week. I mean, we haven't gotten a baby.
We're glad
moment,
it's Josh. Forget that stupid Andy guy.
Yeah, if he's watching.
But I love that. It's the idea that he's also trying to go against how he's raised. He lost his dad. He had to deal with a lot of this on his own. We see it in Clone Wars.
Yep.
How does that hit you?
Well, and I think it hits harder because of the loss of the Tusken Raider tribe, because he found his family. You know, I tweeted a couple of weeks, maybe the first or second episode, he was born on an ocean planet. He was reborn on a sand planet, and he found family. And, you know, I'm transparent. Look, people say I'm a Disney shill, but I do have comments. I believe that, and Tamar Morrison's acting is good. Is it Oscar worthy? No. But
sure,
when he was dumping those bodies on the fire, I believed 100% that his heart was broken, that moment changed him. And in a way, it might have been that overconfidence from the comic book version of Boba Fett that said, hey, I got a gun and a stick now. I know how to use all of it. I can drive this, and came back to find that, I mean, they're dead because of him. Let's face it. Let's put it that way.
Right.
They're dead because of him. So based on what Josh was saying, I think that's part of the challenge, right? It's this found family. It's that common theme. You talk about it all the time. Found family in Star Wars is gigantic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think that it's very interesting that we're seeing him, you know, maybe the tamer Boba Fett that we've a little bit heard people complain about.
Yep.
Is a direct, like you said, it's a direct result of him, you know, paying for mistakes he's made. There was one point about the loss of the Tuskens and the loss of that tribe that you texted me, and I sent you a screenshot back that it was literally the first bullet point on my list. And it'll lead a little bit to predictions, which we'll talk about at the end of the show, but it was very obvious that the female Tusken warrior was not shown in those shots that we get.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, it was funny. And look, I'm not a big fan. I'm coming to learn that I'm not a big fan of Robert Rodriguez's style of directing. But what he did a great job of, I was looking for her, and I didn't even realize to think that I was looking for her until I realized after the scene that I'd noticed that she wasn't seen. So to that end, I think that's great. Interestingly, Robert Rodriguez also has my favorite shot in all of Mandalorian when Fennec Shand is jumping backwards off the cliff. I could watch that scene over and over.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is very clear that she is not part of the wreckage, the death toll. We see the chief, we see the male chief.
That's right.
We don't have proof that it is or is not the child's stick, but we do know that at least it's a recognition that younglings were killed, right? Maybe Anakin Skywalker was part of the street gang that came and took him out, because that killed them all, the women, the children, all of them.
Absolutely.
But
that flashback, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, in that flashback, and you hit on it a minute ago, it was kind of the opposite of last week's episode. Last week, we got like 10 minutes of the present, and the rest of the episode was the flashback. This week, we get, about 5 to 10 minutes, it's not even 10 minutes really of the flashback. The rest is in the present, the chase, which is a big part of it. But I do want to call out one thing in that flashback scene, and this is another shot for us to look at. We get another cameo, less pronounced, but we get Peli Motto. We get her from Mandalorian marching through the street, stomping, if you will, with her pit droids in tow.
Loved it.
But something else I loved about this shot, and it was very intentional. They show one of those stormtrooper helmets being put on one of those pikes.
Yes.
Not those pikes, the other pikes, as Boba passes by. So catching all three of these things. So this leads me to believe this shot in this time frame is Mando time frame. Mandalorian season, because this was a very prominent Mandalorian shot. These stormtrooper helmets on these spikes, Peli Motto, And so, of course, we're getting overlapping timelines. That's something that we don't have a full picture of yet. But to me, this is the clearest connection that this is something close to a time frame we've already seen in Mandalorian.
You know what? It's so funny. I was just so happy to see that scene and see Peli Moto and to see the stormtrooper helmets going on the sticks. I totally lost sight of that. I thought it was. I didn't think of that, but that's true. That's a great connection. It's a visual cue. It's the way they tell stories. I'm gonna spring this on you. We have a guest hanging out with us. We'll just we'll give. I know he's got a couple minutes before he's got to go on to his next thing, but I want to bring in a good friend of ours from the Bombad cast, Mr. Scotty Jaro. Scotty, how you doing, buddy?
Boys, what's going on, y'all?
The night just got better.
So, Scotty, what was your? How did this episode strike you? I saw a little bit of you guys last night talking about it. What's your take? Actually, before you tell me, I want to. We did a poll, and we got some feedback from people as to how they thought this episode played. Yeah, I'm supposed to have this ready, but I don't. So I asked if did Chapter 3 change your opinion of the series? And 65% of people said nope, they're already in. 18% said they're more excited now, and 16% said they're less interested. That's interesting because last week only 4% said they were less interested. So something about this episode did not sit well with more people. So Scotty, how did you feel about it?
See, it was one of those ones when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh, I like it. Second time, I was like, oh, I really like it now. I don't know what it was. I thought it was a special episode. I think it's going to be one of those ones that we look back at and go, I know why they did this now. This makes more sense now. Kind of like the Chapter 2 episode with Frog Lady from, Chapter 10 episode with the Frog Lady from season 2 of Mando. I mean, that was one of those ones you watched first time. You're like, why did they do this? And then you watch it again. You're like, oh, I kind of understand now. I get it. It's more for Grogu's growth. It's Din's growth as a parent. It's just, this episode will do the same exact thing. The Rancor setup, brilliant. I love it. I really do. Yeah. And I will say real quick before we talk more Mando, this is nice here. Look at this, y'all. Streaming Star Wars is back, and it looks so good. I'm so proud of these boys. I really am so proud of both. They've worked very hard on this, and I'm thankful to call them my friends, especially in this universe. But
dude, I was so excited to see you pop in. It was great to see you here. So,
but no, seriously, this episode is one of those ones that kind of changed after a second viewing. I'm gonna watch it a third time tomorrow morning. So I'm thinking it's one of those ones that's gonna age pretty good with time progresses, but I don't know. I liked it. I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't even get to. Let's talk about the Rancor for a second, because first of all, to see Danny Trejo as part of the Star Wars universe. I mean, look at that. Look at that. The man was born to be in Star Wars. We didn't even know.
Absolutely. I said this in my head at work today, thinking about the show tonight. You know, when I should have been working on important, life-saving blood things, and I was, running other things through my head.
Yeah.
It was one of the, like I said last week, I didn't know that I wanted an emotionally developed Boba Fett. This week, I didn't know that I wanted Stephen Root and Danny Trejo in Star Wars.
Same
but
episode.
My God, they both absolutely 100% fit and work.
Yeah, it was great. And I loved how he would be the Rancor keeper. Like, it's just, and he's got such a rugged face. Like, he looks like he has such like a history with these animals. I don't know. It worked perfectly. And the line of a century, I never thought in Star Wars we'd get the line that Rancors are emotionally complex creatures. I was like, what is this? Look at this shot. This is next level.
Yeah,
y'all.
I love that. But can we trust him? So I asked Twitter. If, hey, I know we want to believe that it was a genuine gift. First of all, it's coming from the Hutts. Don't trust.
Yeah, I was saying the Hutts is the bigger concern.
The Hutts. Can we trust it? It's a 50-50 split. And I didn't think much about it until I was watching it the second time. And just the line when Boba Fett leaves the room and Danny says to the Rancor, don't worry, he'll be back.
I know.
And he didn't say it like, don't worry, he'll be back. It was like, he'll be back. So, I just love it.
I agree with Seth. Jabba's palace is not right without a Rancor. And we got that last week when they throw, the the Nightwind assassin that they drop down there.
Yeah.
You know, he freaks out, and Fennec very sarcastically in another of those human moments, it's empty. Like, you know, quit freaking out. But like everybody knows. So here's the big question. And I'll be perfectly honest. I can't believe, and I'm being perfectly honest with this, I have not seen a single person on Twitter since Wednesday ask the question about the Rancor that we know somebody wants to ask, which is it Moochie from Bad Batch? I don't know anything about Rancor ages, but there's somebody out there who has spent more time going, if you do this, it could be. And you don't know. We haven't heard
string in the Post-it notes.
Yeah, we haven't heard Trejo say, "Oh, by the way, I named it whatever." I don't think it is, but you know, it's floating around out there somewhere.
Sure,
somebody. I'm sure Jerry believes that it's
oh yeah, you know he does. Wishful thinking, y'all. It's so crazy too with that reveal. You know, when the first time he sees Boba Fett, I think maybe he was trained to see Boba Fett. I don't know. I wonder, like, was he like shown a bunch of holograms? So will he like attack Boba? That's one of those things.
I love that thought. I love that thought. That feels like, you know, like a drug dog, right? You put him on the scent, and there he is. Yep. And maybe the reason he had the blinders on was so he wouldn't kill him when he saw him, right?
They had to give him time to get comfortable, time to get set up.
And you know what, too? Man. One thing I will say is here's a pro tip. No, I'm not a pro, obviously, but when it comes to this, don't watch the recaps anymore, because I watched the recap before it started, and it starts with the guy falling down the Rancor pit, and then it's like there's no Rancor. I'm like, okay, well, I know what we're getting now. Like I now know retroactively what we're gonna get. So I just don't. I click skip now. You kind of have to.
That's a Mandalorian lesson, because they did that a bunch of times where you're just like, oh, all right, well, we know what's coming. Yeah, and that ain't good. That ain't good.
It's also like, what was the show a couple of years ago? Now I'm trying to remember if it was Mad Men. I think it was Mad Men. Mad Men had the most useless previously on recaps of any TV show I've ever watched in my life. Like nothing in the recaps related to that episode. There was some recent show that like, what are we even doing here? But but that's a good tip, Scotty. I like that.
It's the opposite with this one.
So Scotty, before we let you go, I want to talk about one other thing. I texted Nick about this right afterwards. If you speaking of, and the reason I thought about this was because of what you said about skipping the intros. In the intro to, I think it was the first episode, maybe it was the second one, we heard the line from The Mandalorian where he says, sometimes fate steps in to smile on the wretched, or something like that. Yeah. What struck me is that's what the Book of Boba Fett is. Boba Fett is that fate stepping in, right? He saved Fennec Shan's life. He made the decision on Chrysanthemum. He made the decision on the street gang. He's trusting all these people. He's the fate that's coming in and saving. What if it wasn't for Boba Fett? That Tusken Raider clan would have been wiped out probably much sooner,
of course,
because those pikes would have kept flying through and just target practicing them. So Boba Fett is sort of Boba Fate in that he is the hand of fate coming in and saving these wretches. And what does that mean? Will that work to his advantage? So, look at Daniel. That's a great point. That's Daniel, who's also the best voice of Boba Fett ever.
That's right. The Boba Fett has chimed in. Of course, I love giving people the chance that he was himself was given. I love that thought.
That is brilliant. And it's funny with that character, honestly, you know, that's the character arc, right? He got a second chance. He was born from the sand. I mean, he had to undergo so much, and he got tormented by, you know, Tuskens for a minute. It's just, I don't know, the way they're telling the story is way better than I ever expected, because the Robert Rodriguez said all killer, no filler. And I'm like, we're going to get like badass Boba Fett the entire time, blah, blah, blah. And that's just not the case. And it's great. We don't need that. We don't need that, because this is what Star Wars does best. It tells us what we need. We don't need to ask for it. It's just going to say, this is what you need to see right now.
Well, and I think it's a point that I made a couple times tonight, and I think it's really important for people who don't like the show because it's not the action figure Boba Fett. Yeah, that's fine, because I think that exists, and I think that can still exist in the Legends. It can exist in the comics, but this is a different Boba Fett, and Daniel nailed it with he's giving them the second chance that he was given, and that's how great of a story is that? You don't
brilliant.
have, and by the way, we have 4 episodes left. We're going to get plenty of killing, plenty of action. I think this is going to end on a huge Robert Rodriguez massive fight. And I think it's going to be across multiple families, multiple arenas. It's going to be giant, but I think
seasons.
And seasons. Yes.
Well, and let me throw this up there if I can while Scotty's still here, and it ties into exactly the question that you just asked. One of the things that we've seen, I keep making the joke about emotionally developed Boba Fett, but one of the things that really struck me last week, and somebody has hit on it, I mean, it goes to what Dan said too. This developed Boba Fett we're getting is a character born out of personal trauma, and also reflecting on the other trauma of the people he's encountering, whether it's Fennec, whether it's the Tuskens. So in that vein, another image that I grabbed for us tonight is this.
Brilliant.
It's young Boba and Scotty being one of my favorite prequel, lovers.
You heard it here.
This was such a great shot. We get a young Daniel Logan. We get the hand on the window, and that little tiny light right in the middle of the screen is Boba Fett's starship flying away. So it's
almost a teardrop.
Yeah, look at that.
It's really a great shot, but it also speaks to, and I think somebody last week actually said this, Boba Fett is a character who's used to being abandoned, used to being left, dealing with, continually being left on his own to sort and figure things out, which would attribute to what Pete said earlier about not knowing how to be a crime boss. He's still figuring things out on his own. What have y'all got for that?
I completely agree with it, Nick. It's one of those things where I grew up wanting to be Daniel Logan, Jango Fett would be my dad. And it's just wild to think that they're giving more backstory to a character, to a person that hasn't played the character since 2002. And that's awesome. That's and that's the brilliance of Star Wars, because he can do that. And they push the technology so much. I mean, I don't know if that's deep fake. I don't know how you would even do a shot like that. Is that a composite from an old picture? Because it looks so good. And
it looks really good. And I know that the ones earlier, I'm sorry to cut you off. No, the ones earlier with him holding the helmet, they did say there were some unused footage from Attack of the Clones that was a part of some of that. So I don't know if this is a used, shot for that. I don't know what it is, but it really is a great shot, which is a funny thing because we've talked before this series ever dropped. Are we going to get Daniel Logan in the Book of Boba Fett? At this point, we have. It's just not the way we anticipated.
See, my only hypothesis before I leave, is that I think by the end of the season, we'll have a full conversation between Daniel Logan's Boba Fett and Tamora Morrison's Jango. And I think that will be so impactful. It could be the last episode. It could be to next week's episode. I just know that they're going to do that. And it's so great that Daniel Logan's getting some more acting credits. I mean, they might even, DH his voice like they did for Mark Hamill with all that. So all that being said, fellas, I'm pumped. We're in for a treat. This show's setting up way more than I ever expected. I'm
no doubt
thankful y'all could bring me on for a moment.
Dude, it was exciting to have you with us. So thank you for hanging out with us, brother.
Stay Bombad.
Stay Bombad. We'll talk to you soon. See ya. Yeah, it's great always great to have Scotty join us. Scotty's point of view is wild, and I love the fact that he brings that prequel perspective with him. But a lot of conversation about prequels, a lot of conversation about things that are a little bit different here.
And I have a couple more things for you as we're looking at this episode. As we're kind of reviewing the episode, some things that I hit the wrong button.
Well.
There you go. This is why we have each other, Pete. So we've talked about the flashback, and then we get to the other side of the flashback. They go to the mayor's office, which, the major domo, the mayor's gone. He's out of here. He makes a break for it, which we find out in a minute ago. So we get the high-speed chase. We get the chase through the streets.
The slow speed chase.
The slow speed chase, which again, I'm gonna save most of that for the next segment. But I do want to bring up a couple of things that relate to the chase. We have a couple of images. My favorite might be this one.
Yes.
As they go through the chase. This is such a Hollywood TV trope. I'm surprised it wasn't a pane of glass, but glass isn't as much of a Star Wars thing or a mirror. But we get the chase going through this painting. And if we
Yes.
look at this painting, and if you're a nerd like you and I are,
Yep.
what we realize pretty quickly is that image and that painting is this.
Yes, exactly.
It's the Ralph McQuarrie concept art from Return of the Jedi. And all they've done, as we jump back and forth, is they've removed Luke Skywalker.
Yep.
And I love that so much. And like, you know, I texted you in a fit of excitement earlier this week that over this shoulder,
Right.
I actually have the Ralph McQuarrie portfolio picture of the Tuscans in the desert.
Yep.
And I remembered it like way too late. And so I swapped it out in my studio to get it up on the wall because it's appropriate. But we have the chase through the streets. There's one other shot that I have to throw up here. And then I want to hear your thoughts kind of about the last part of the episode. We have the mayor.
Yes.
He crashes, which leads to Back to the Future tie-ins. It's not, you know, a truck full of manure. It's a truck full of Melu runs.
Yes.
And what we know about the Melu run is that it is a fruit from Star Wars Rebels. And it was one of the early tests that Hera sent Ezra out. You know, it's my favorite fruit. Go get it.
Yep.
Whatever. I thought I put a picture up in here of it, and now I don't see it. But like, that's a direct animation tie-in, which I love so much. So that's just a fun little thing. So the chase through the streets, the reveal that the mayor is working with the Pikes.
Yeah.
And we end the episode with the Pikes coming down the ramp of what they called the Galactic Cruiser or the Star Cruiser. Give me your thoughts kind of on this last little segment of the show, what you saw, what, you know, we won't get to predictions yet, but what did you see there that struck you?
The thing that struck me was, first of all, it felt very much like the way Kira got off the Falcon in Solo. Just because I think, you know, the capes, the colors, the fact that it was Pikes. In fact, it was my expectation. I sat down. I'm like, here comes Kira. Here she comes.
Yep.
And then no, it didn't happen. So, but again, what's interesting is, and we'll get into this in the prediction segment, is she a big enough, well known enough character to have an impact on people outside of, you know, us sweaty nerds who are checking this out now? Or were they deliberately building the Pikes up to be the bad guys, and there'll be some Pike boss? So, but my takeaway was it was a cool way to end it, and it definitely left us, you know, the conversation about with Fennec and Boba about, you know, we're going to war, and you don't end an episode with we're going to war and then next week be, you know, 45 minutes of flashbacks. This is going to be the start of something. So,
well, and we're essentially at this point, because it's 7 episodes, you know, the 4th episode is the middle episode. So we're on the back side of that hill. We're heading down, we're picking up speed, you know, that's where we're headed. I will say, and I'm exactly with you, I expected that shot coming down the ramp that they end the episode on. I expected there to be a Kira right in the middle of it. What I haven't ruled out is that that's how the next episode opens. There's enough of us that would expect that what if, you know, they just push it, you know, they cut it weird. It's, you know, a thing. But here's my question, and talking about, like you said, is she big enough? Is she a big enough bad? My question coming out of it was, who's scary enough that the Hutts are ready to get out? Because that was the big takeaway. They show up, they tell Boba, we're sorry. Yeah, we sent him to kill you. We're sorry. There's somebody else and it's not worth it. We're out.
And it's interesting to catch, and this is something I picked up on, is Boba said, if you renounce your claim, they never renounced their claim. All they said was, we're leaving, and you should too. And so, so what is it? What is a big enough bad to have that impact? Yeah, Blue Bantha Milk is probably Matt or Sean, one of the two. Good to see either one of you or both of you with us. Love you guys.
Both of you.
He says, even for people that don't know Kira as a character, you can get away with the intro for the general public because she's played by an A-lister. That is a fantastic point, right? Even if I never saw another Star Wars and I see Emilia Clarke. I know she's a big bad. That's a great point. Yeah, I love that. I'm still convinced it's her. I'm convinced that's who it's got to be, because if you do tie all these together, at the end of Solo: A Star Wars Story, she was being handed, because we know Maul dies. She's handed the keys to Crimson Dawn. And that's kind of a big deal. But what's interesting is there has not yet been a reference to Crimson Dawn in this series. So you would have thought that at some point somebody would have, even just like a casual line, well, hey, you're not as strong as Crimson Dawn, or it's the Hutts, not Crimson Dawn, or something like that, to let you know that there's a bigger force out there. But
and it's interesting. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, maybe they're just relying on the fact that if the Hutts are scared, you, the audience, should be scared as well.
Absolutely. And I love that. And on a personal note, one of the notes that I made in my list was, to me personally, the Pikes aren't scary enough. Like, I don't know if it's the mask that they've used for these characters.
My son calls them the fish people. He is not scared of them at all.
That's right. Yeah, they're not scary. What I did 2 nights ago with my oldest, as we went back and watched some Clone Wars stuff. And I think I texted you, I was going to watch the Pike arcs of the Clone Wars to kind of see where we are. Those first Pike episodes of Clone Wars are connected to Black Sun. And Black Sun to me is way scarier than the Pikes. You know, Shizor and, you know, that alien species, that kind of thing. So it may be that they're setting the Pikes up to be that, but to me, they're not that intimidating. They're not that scary. So I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, they don't feel scary. And maybe I think that might be intentional.
Daniel Miller just hit it again. I liked not knowing what they looked like under the mask.
I agree with that 100%. I think it's taken away some of the mystery. But again, maybe they're doing that so that you don't feel that they are as intimidating. I mean, when he walked in on them in Mos Eisley and he's just sort of sitting there swinging a drink in his hand, Boba could have taken him out right then and there. So
there were no stakes there. So obviously that wasn't going to be the thing.
Correct. Yeah, no, I love what Blue Bantha Milk said there with Emilia Clarke. If my dad, I always reference my dad. My dad, if he's watching it and he forgot about Solo, which he probably has, because I think he might have seen it once. Emilia, you know, the Mother of Dragons walks down. You got a problem. Good. Well, hey, speaking of problems, let's talk about fan reaction.
Let's do
to this week's episode. We make it a little spicy here. So I put in the thumbnail of this episode, oh no, shiny speeder bikes. I have to say, this has been one of the absolute most ridiculous. And it's funny that Blue Bantha Milk is with us watching, because Matt, I believe, made the comment that we've given way too much press and airtime to people who are bitching about the shiny speeder bikes. But
yes,
I just what I kind of want to do here is I just want to have a conversation and also hear from the people in the chat. I want to just sort of express why I think they totally fit for a number of reasons. You have some of the George Lucas reasons, and that makes sense too. And we'll definitely, I want you to talk about that.
Yeah. But
I think one of the things that we are losing sight of is we saw them on screen. Look, I will be the first to admit, I said it before, I'm not a big fan, turns out, of the Robert Rodriguez style. The speeder chase, what my 9-year-old son sitting next to me at 6 a.m. watching it, and he's like, this is really slow. He said that.
Right.
He was saying that. So it was really, so from a execution of the chase, yes, I loved all the just like you, I loved all the car chase tropes and everything that was in there. But I really, really, really liked this gang, and I loved the fact there was a blue, red, yellow, and green completely out of place speeder, because of the fact that we know nothing about these guys at all.
Correct.
There's been some major assumptions on Twitter from people who want to be angry. And that is the thing. It's a bunch of people who are looking for reason to be angry at anything they can find as it relates to Disney era Star Wars. And the biggest complaint is that the speeders look out of place. Okay, so maybe somebody, maybe they stole them from somebody who just landed on World. I don't care where it came from. Number two, well, if they're so poor that they can't afford water, how do they have these shiny, beautiful bikes? We don't know that they're poor. In fact, to look at the way they're dressed, they look like they're coming from a pretty well-to-do family. I wish I could remember who tweeted it, and I am so sorry, because it's somebody who I know I have a regular conversation with on Twitter, and I can't remember who it was who said it, but their headcanon is that these are like the kids of children who are displaced, children of people who are displaced by the end of the revolution against the empire. And they're just kids. And if you brought up the whole thing about the mods, the thing that people need to recognize about the mods, and look, that is a total Star Wars thing, is to find a real world Earth thing and Star Wars it. And the mods were all about their bikes. They were all about dressing different, dressing really in their own really sharp but unique way. These guys are Star Wars mods, and you know, their bikes are not dirty because they probably care more about their bikes than anything else. They've put cybernetics into their own bodies. That's where their heads are at. And yes, the chase was disappointing. I will put it flat out there. Disappointing chase. The result was cool, but the chase was disappointing. But the characters, the bikes, the concept, I love the fact that we've never seen color on Tatooine. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why these guys are there, and it's exciting to see. And I'm a big fan of it.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to point out this comment that Dale put in here. It's like it's almost like it's a hub for trade routes and smugglers. Oh wait, this isn't a fixed point in the galaxy. This is a pass through. This is a place where a bunch of people go. And I'll use a very real world comparison for me. I live in Montgomery, Alabama. The Atlanta airport is 2 hours away. From the Atlanta airport, you can get everywhere. It's like if Mos Eisley was the Atlanta airport. You're going to see everything. People are coming and going. We get these galactic cruisers. We get all these different things coming through. But we also get, like you said, it's a cultural thing. And I think the creators of this series, in nods to George Lucas, we talked about this earlier, this was an actual 60s Vespa mod setup. Yep. If you look at this is what we got on screen. Like 100%. These are those homages. These are those things that, like, I read an article about it and I put this one up as a joke, but like, the comments about the mirrors, like, this was a real picture of somebody from one of these mod gangs. And it was that was his sign of honor, and the amount of effort and energy, like you said, the cleanliness. If you have a good car, if you have a nice car, I don't care if you live in the middle of the desert in Arizona, you're going to keep it clean and looking good. And, you know, I think that speaks to that. And I think the other thing about what we don't know about these people is, like you said, they didn't say they couldn't afford water. They were just outraged at the prices he was charging for it.
And let's look at honestly, like, this is going to probably catch me some flack, but if you look at the people who complain about the state of the world, you would think it is the people who are most impacted. But let's face it, the people complaining of the state of the world are the people sitting in the Starbucks on their iPhone 13 Pro Max tweeting about how crappy the world is. This is that example. This is, 4 or 5 teenagers who are just angry at everything. And they make a valid point. The watermonger is charging way too much for water. So you know what? It's not that I can't afford it. I'm going to steal it. And you pointed out the mods would go get in trouble because they could, not because they needed to, not because they were, trying to survive. The mods had no problem surviving. They just wanted to have some fun and make some trouble. And when Boba offered them a job, they're like, yeah, hey, this is a crime boss. Let's go check this out. This could be fun. So,
yeah, it's such an interesting thing. And again, that's been the biggest outcry from this episode, which means there's a little part of me that, like, if that's the biggest thing we're pissed off about this episode, what are we even talking about?
Right. Well, we're in a spot where people
bike speeders.
Right. And again, this is one of those things where I feel like as a fandom right now, we are seeing some really bad takes about this. And what it is it's people are running out of things to be angry about, to be frank. Mm-hmm. I think it's, if you are trying to find a reason to hate Disney Star Wars, you will find it, right? And honestly, I could nitpick. I tweeted about it and I got a whole bunch of guff for it, but I could nitpick every single Star Wars thing I've ever seen in my life. My favorite Star Wars movie and the favorite Star Wars movie of most of the people I've interviewed on my show is The Empire Strikes Back. Correct. Let's take just a couple minutes and we can find 20 things wrong in the first 20 minutes of the movie.
So without question.
But it's Star Wars. It's supposed to be, I'm not even going to go down the road of being an escape. It's supposed to be a fun adventure. And once you start applying the logic that people who hate The Last Jedi apply, bombs in space. Yeah, no kidding. It's different. But you know what? The Death Star blew up with an explosion. That would not have happened. You'd be bored as hell
if we showed a movie where the science was real and nothing happened when a bomb went off.
Right. Last week, people were complaining about a train moving cargo when they have spaceships. You know what? If you're looking for logistics logic, wrong franchise for you.
Go work for FedEx. That's not where you're supposed to be.
Go play Sim Train Yard or something and have some fun. But again, I get it. You don't have to love it. I said it multiple times on this show. I'm not loving what I'm seeing from the way Robert Rodriguez shoots a show. On the the fight with Chrysanthemum and Boba Fett, I felt like it was choreographed strange to me.
Right.
Was it awful? No. Did it pull me out? No. But it's not something I love, but you know what? I love the story that came along with it. And I think there's this interesting concept that if you defend Disney Star Wars, you're defending everything. And I'm defending the story. And I love this story. We talked about it earlier. It's not the story anybody expected from Book of Boba Fett. Again, Mandalorian was not the story anybody expected, but it works and it's engaging. And as we showed before, people want to see more of it, and I'm all for it. And you know what? If these bikes are too shiny for you, then you know it's comic booky. Honestly, it's very. I could see this gang being, and we probably will see them in the War of the Bounty Hunter or something, or Crimson Reign. But it's just they're very different, and that's cool. We want different.
Yep. And I want to say, and just to shout it out, Chris Ryans himself, the people bitching about space Vespas and cybernetic augmented kids have never read a Star Wars comic book.
That is a great point, Chris. Yep.
And then we also saw it when other people complained about it. Dan says it too, or watch the prequels. Literally, we have a line from Anakin Skywalker to Obi-Wan about selecting a speeder that was in a color he liked. Like, what are we even talking about here?
Right. That's a great point. Who brought that up? That was great. That's brilliant.
That part was me, but Dan's right about the prequels. The prequels are shiny. The prequels are colorful. The yellow Naboo starfighters. We had never seen that in Star Wars before those things happened, whether it was in Phantom Menace or going forward. Because the big thing was Star Wars is supposed to feel lived in. And that was a big part of all the documentaries and all the behind the scenes and all of the things that we got with the original trilogy. So the understanding that Lucas leaned on and makes 100% sense is, okay, so if the prequels are before the original trilogy, things are going to be newer than they were before.
Right.
And you're going to get, Padme's ship that's shiny as hell because she's a senator and she comes from a planet where there's people of means. It's a whole different thing. That was very normal.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's Chris Ryans actually posted this week that Star Wars, the prequels were full of things, as you were just saying, that we didn't like, but now we look back at, and it's Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. We are going to look back, I hope, at these Vespa and be like, yeah, that's Star Wars. That's cool.
Yep.
And I mean, I do think we suffer a little bit from the fact that we expect, and everything we've ever seen on Tatooine is beat up. And I mean, even the stormtroopers that came straight off the Star Destroyer to search for the droids were messy, and that's what Tatooine does. But like you said, I will bet you there's people who living paycheck to paycheck who have beautiful hot rods living in Arizona that never keep dust on them beyond the drive to and from wherever they're going.
In fact, to prove your point, Brian from Pink Milk, who lives in Arizona, I can second that. I live in Arizona and had a Prestige orange Vespa.
And I bet you he kept it in pristine condition.
That's
knowing
exactly it.
knowing
That's
Brian
exactly it.
the way I've gotten
Chris
to
said
know
it
him,
too.
I'm sure.
I've
Yep.
seen the slickest cars in the worst neighborhoods in
yes.
Philly. This isn't far-fetched. We've all been there. We
Absolutely.
all know what that looks like.
We all saw Pimp My Ride, right? Those.
That's right. We have all seen Pimp My Ride. This is the Tatooine version of Pimp My Ride. So as the recap, before we get to predictions and theories and fan reaction, is there anything else for fan reaction that you wanted to address, look at, stands out for you?
There's probably 100 things because I spend too much time on Twitter and see people having some really, really bad takes. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is, and here's my advice, because I did this a lot in the last month, probably, is when you start to see people who are just out there shit posting, just block them, mute them or block them, and just move along, because honestly, what they're looking for is an opportunity to argue about something that is so dumb. Now, look, I mean, we said it here, and I said, me and my son had the conversation. The chase was slow. The speeders were different. I'm not saying I didn't like them. I'm saying they were different. And I recognized immediately. Yeah, I watched it. I was like, whoa, those are very bright speeders on the streets of Tatooine. Mm-hmm. But I didn't pick up my phone and start tweeting, this is awful. Because the people who are tweeting that, the people who are trolling, the people who are not critiquing, look, and I'm all for a critique. Look, we can sit here, and we probably will over the next several weeks, talking about things that are the style of, again, Robert Rodriguez's style, his style of that chase scene. Mm-hmm. I wish it was a different director. I think it would have been a more intense, more interesting.
And I think you hit on something really interesting. And you and I, of course, have texted about this individually one-on-one. Mm-hmm. There's such a difference in Star Wars fandom. Twitter maybe is probably a more fair way to represent that. Mm-hmm. Loses so much of this, but there's such a difference between critique and constructive criticism versus just bitching about something you don't like and deciding that because you didn't like this one thing, it has completely ruined all of Star Wars, because that's not how life works.
Right.
And connected to that, I mean, Michael Nip said it. Where'd it go? Michael said it. Pablo's tweet today said it all in regards to social media and the like. It's the platform. We're magnifying a bunch of people who are getting clicks and views, and you've done videos about clickbait. We've all know, there's so much of it that is just nonsense. So when we take the opportunity to go, oh, this is a part I didn't enjoy, but I didn't set my head on fire about it. And I'm going to call out Michael Nip again. Michael's in the chat. Michael's here hanging out.
Hey, Michael.
Good friend of mine. He said on the Deucecast Extra, I think the first week after episode 1, there's a thing where we're getting used to the volume.
Yeah.
And so we made a joke. There should be a t-shirt that said, I saw the volume. Because there are moments, and I think the speeder chase for me was the first moment where I went, this feels like I can see the volume, the way we felt about the prequels. It felt like it was all green screen.
Yep.
It doesn't happen all the time. And it doesn't mean the show is ruined. It just means there's a moment where I go, this felt a little more TV show. One of my notes, one of my bullet points was, is this our Star Wars soap opera?
Yeah.
Because it's a little soap opera. The acting is a little bit chew the scenery. Yeah. The background is a little like, oh, this feels weird, but it doesn't take me out of it. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen by 100 miles.
Right.
But at what point, what are we complaining about? I guess is the point.
It's when I had this past week on Around the Galaxy, we had Kyle Katarn on, and he's a big fan of fan films, and we were talking about Book of Boba Fett, and which honestly, I will say this, and I could get ripped for it, but Book of Boba Fett is a Lucasfilm fan film, right? It really is. I mean, we're getting that story, but he said we have no place to complain. We're getting, I think the way he put it was beautiful 4K Star Wars live action every week. And look, and here's the thing, and I get the point that the people who want to hate Disney and just, I think they just don't know how to express themselves. I get it. You don't have to love everything, and nobody is expecting you to love every single frame that we get from Book of Boba Fett, from The Mandalorian, from Ahsoka, from whatever's coming down the road. But it's just the story's advancing. We're getting more about characters that we love from a galaxy that we love, and that's honestly that's what it comes down to. And I think the difference between you and I and the people that I've taken to aggressively blocking and muting are those that don't want to be happy about it. And honestly, I've said it before, The Matrix, I loved Matrix 1, Matrix 2 and 3. I don't at me. I hated those movies. I tried to love them. I watched them multiple times. I tried, but I didn't. But I'm not out on Twitter when I see somebody and we saw it a lot when the last Matrix came out. Yeah. When the last Matrix came out, people were like, Revolutions isn't that bad, or what, I don't even remember the names of them. I wasn't out there just like, well, you're wrong, because people love it. That's awesome. If you love it, love it. And you don't have to love everything about it.
No. And I feel like, and I'm totally co-opting this from somebody else, so I don't claim this as an original thought, but I feel like somebody at some point, maybe even on one of your shows, probably made the comparison of like going to a restaurant and you don't like that restaurant, but you keep going back there just so you can talk about how much you don't like that restaurant. Like, if you're this upset about Star Wars, what the hell are you still doing here? Like, this isn't for you. Go watch something else. I don't know what it is, but it just, there's so much of that, and it's gotten to a point of almost like, actual parody. Like Star Wars Twitter is known for being complainy instead of, and here's a great point, and maybe this is what I want to kind of circle this part of the show in on. We texted earlier today about, is there somebody that didn't like the speeder chase that we could talk to together in a positive way, constructive criticism? And all the people that we came up with were like, everybody we know was fine with it. Like, it wasn't their favorite, but they were fine with it. Like, that's also the echo chamber part of Twitter. Like, it just is magnifying for people that are crazy.
Yeah. I go back to
that's a bad way to put it, but
well, people who are unsatisfied, people who are willing to, who would prefer to be angry than to enjoy it. See, that's one thing that I just don't understand. Why would you I'm a Flyers fan. I would not go to a Rangers versus Devils game because I would not have fun at that game. Right.
I was literally in my head as you started that sentence, thought, I live in Alabama and I'm an Auburn fan. I wouldn't go hang out at Alabama games like, I'm an Auburn fan. Why would I do that? This isn't where I need to be. This isn't my thing. So
my friend Katrina Dennis, when she was on the show, she's just a great follow on Twitter. Oh, Katrina. She said, it's like if you go to the buffet at Sizzler and you just go up because you want the ice cream, but there's broccoli there, and you just complain that there's broccoli on the buffet that you like. It makes no sense, right? Just go and do what you want to do.
Ice cream.
That's right. Have some fun. So let's talk about next week. You made the great point, and it's something that sort of struck me as we were preparing, that we are at the halfway point. Next week is that sort of the fulcrum, if you will.
That's right.
I wonder if fulcrum will be in there. We are the fulcrum of the series. Nick, what's going to happen? I think we both got our predictions wrong this week, which is not surprising. I live on the fact that my predictions are always wrong. But what are you thinking we're going to see next week?
I am 98% wrong with my
I thought you were going to say 98% sure. And I was like, oh, wow, here we go.
I have a 98% history with being wrong about predictions. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some out there without Amanda. I'm still living, and I have three really quickly. One is, it used to be that I thought Boba was going to die, and that meant that Din would get Boba's ship by the beginning of Mando season 3 because Din needs a ship. Yeah, I think that has pivoted. It could be that he still goes back to live with the Tuscans and retires. I think there's still a version of that happens, but I've already talked about that. So the two this week, there was a specific moment with Chrysanthemum after the attack, after he throws him in the dungeon, when the Hutts show up and he says, hey, here's your thing, you can have him back. They're like, we're leaving him to you as a tribute. This new developed Boba Fett we got sets him free.
Yep.
it's not talked about a lot, but there's a thing that exists in Star Wars, certainly in the Legends version, of a Wookiee life debt. I think there's the potential that Chrysanthemum could show up to repay, even if it's not a life debt. It's a evening the score kind of moment.
I love
he
that.
comes back to help Boba, because we got this very awkward, like, okay, you're free, and he just runs off the screen, which made me laugh out loud.
It was a funny laugh.
The way he just kind of like chucked it off the screen made me laugh.
Yeah.
But I think that could pay off. I think that paying back that, moment of grace, whatever it is, pays off. Here's the other thing. This is my bigger one, and this is about as far of a reach as I can get. We were disappointed that we didn't get Kira coming down the ramp to end the episode, because we all expected it. Those of us that know the Pikes, Solo the movie, all that stuff. What if the big bad, because I said, who are the Hutts scared of?
Right.
We know at some point in live action, because of what we saw in Mando season 2, and because we know that there's an Ahsoka series coming in this time frame. What if the thing that the Hutts are scared of is Thrawn?
You started building it up, and I was like,
I swear on everything in my life, that hit me while we were talking about it, while this episode has been on.
That would be wild.
The tease to set up the next thing, the same way we get a tease of Ahsoka in Mando season 2 to set up her series. What if the drop? We've kind of said, what if Sabine showed up? There's something that's going to connect to either Mando season 3 or specifically the Ahsoka series, I think, because the time frame works. So what if the thing everybody's scared of is Thrawn is back and he's the one running things?
Wow. Well, one of my predictions broadly is that The Mandalorian is about the Mandalorian, and that we are building all these different series pieces together to get to a point where Mando is the chosen one. Din Djarin is the chosen one, whatever they call him in Mandalorian. It would be great if he had to fight through Thrawn to get that. And it's interesting because, to me, the whole Book of Boba Fett so far has been about him building his army. And my prediction was that he was building his army through his crime lord connections, so that he could go back and take what he believed was his, what Boba Fett believed was his, was the mantle of Mandalore, and he would go head to head with Din. What I'm seeing in this series so far is he's not going head to head with Din. We may see them team up, but he's not going head to head with Din, because they're very, very, very similar. And I think I think it's a team up, and I think it's the combination of Boba, like we said, figuring out how to compromise. Yeah. And with Din is the reluctant leader. Yep. He has ethics and integrity and doesn't feel like he's supposed to be the one in charge. And that's why he should be the one in charge. Yeah. Yeah. Well, exactly. What is it? It's actually from Dune, right? Great. Leaders aren't chosen. I'm going to screw up the quote, but what they tell him is, you can't choose whether you're going to be a leader. Suddenly you are. Right. You just are. And I think Din accidentally picking up the Darksaber has put him in that spot. So the question then becomes, it would be amazing if there was this fear of the Chiss ascendancy kind of coming in and using the crime lords to do so. I mean, that's great. I mean, that's not something that Thrawn wouldn't do. He would leverage what he knows about the way crime lords work. Well, and it's interesting. And I mentioned this earlier in the show, last night and the night before. We have this whole deal in my house. It's too long to go into, really, but like my wife and most of my girls watch Little House on the Prairie, but Harper, my oldest, who is my Star Wars kid, when they go to do that, she's like, can we watch Star Wars? I don't care what it is. Rebels, Mando, Boba. She's the one I get up on Wednesday mornings at 5 a.m. to watch Boba before school. Nice. And so the other night they went to watch Little House on the Prairie, and she said, what are we going to watch? And so, because I was kind of driving my own selfish agenda, I said, we're going to watch the Pike arc of Clone Wars. Yep. The Pike arc of Clone Wars that's recommended in the tweet that I sent to you is directly feeds into Maul
consolidating power on Mandalore.
Yeah.
The loss of Satine, getting the Darksaber, pulling all those different groups together, which is very along the lines of this same thing. Thrawn shows up, consolidating power, underground warlord, because we're in a different era of the Empire and the failed Empire. And so he shows up after Rebels to try and put those pieces back together. You can't show up and do it in a big formed structure. He has to do it from the bottom and work his way up.
Is there any connection between the Feline, which is Shizor's race, and the Chiss? I wonder. I mean, other than
that would be great to know. And it was interesting in that moment because, of course, the big Feline moment that we get when Maul shows up with the Black Sun in Clone Wars is he throws the saber and they all get decapitated. And the one lieutenant who's still standing is like, okay, cool, we're following you now.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's post Maul. That this takes place post Maul. Sure. Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm going to stick with. I think we are going to get the flashback this week of. I'm going to be much more tactical than you were. I think we're going to get the flashback this week of finding Fennec and going to get Slave One / fire spray. That's a whole. God, I hope next week.
Ford Taurus.
Ford Taurus. I hope next week is the Boba Fett Starship episode because I can't wait. That will be my Twitter wants to be mad rant next week because dude, well,
we just need to get that over with and move on.
You know that I have a very direct authority that it's still Slave One. Damn it. Kills me. But anyway, I think we're going to see that story. I think what might be interesting is we might learn a little bit about the Fennec Boba connection next week. Because why did he find her, track her in the desert, save her life? Especially because of her connection with Omega from Bad Batch. There's got to be some sort of he knows her somehow kind of thing. I don't feel, and this is why I love the way Ming-Na portrays her. I don't think she's loyal to Boba because he saved his life. I feel like there's something more there, right? I mean, look, we said it at the very beginning of this episode. She's in a position where I feel like if she wanted to be like, yeah, let me take over, she could shut. I mean, Chrysanthemum got past her for a reason. But I think she's incredibly loyal to Boba, and I want to know why. So maybe we'll get some of that story. And I think to your point, I think next week is going to be a big one. I think I texted in our little group with Yumi and Scotty when we all predicted. I predicted Kira shows up in episode 4. I'm going to stick with that. I think we're going to see.
That's a great one to stick with.
I think we're going to see that in this episode, and I think we're going to see how he gets his ship back, and then. I love
open after that.
Yeah, and then I think the last 3 episodes are all the finish of the Book of Boba Fett.
In the words of Sam Jackson in Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts.
Hold on to your butts.
That's it.
Well, Nick, this has been so much fun. We're going to do this every single Friday night. You know, it's funny. At first I was like, yeah, maybe we should do it Wednesday night. And then I was like, everybody does their reaction shows. I love this because you and I and the people hanging out with us tonight. First of all, thank you to all of you who hung out with us.
Everybody for being here.
And if you're listening on the replay, thanks for checking that out as well. It gives you a chance to kind of digest it. And that's the kind of conversation I want to have. I don't want to have the initial reaction. I want to have let's think about it, think about where it's going. But this has been absolutely a blast. This week on ATG Cast is a podcast of the Wills. What do you got coming up?
Actually, we're very excited. This week is week 2 of Canon Studies, Return of the Jedi. And it is with our good friend who has been hanging out in the chat with us tonight, Mr. Chris Ryans from the Broaxium Network. Everybody's favorite, as I love to say, and I think he actually said it before I did, Lando Calrissian. But Chris is going to be on. He is a staunch lover of Return of the Jedi because of people of a certain age like he and I are, and you're just a tiny bit older than he and I, but like it hitting a prime. Like that's a key movie for us as Star Wars fans. So Chris is going to be on this week. That episode is going to drop this next Thursday. And it's going to be a ton of fun digging into chapter 2 of our canon study of Jedi.
That is great. And then the following week, I have Around the Galaxy. It's my 150th episode. I'm working on something a little bit different for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so I'll keep that kind of under wraps. But I know you got some great guests coming up. I got some great guests coming up.
Absolutely.
And for those of you hanging out with us on the ATG Cast stream, thank you so much. We love that you hang out with us 3 days a week. And Nick, I guess that is
Yes,
it,
sir.
man. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and
You
may
too.
the force be with you.
Always.
That wraps it up for this episode of Streaming Star Wars. Please like, subscribe, share, rate, and review it. Follow us on all your social media channels at ATGcast. Visit our website at atgcast.com. And hey, support the show as an ATG patron by going to patreon.com/ATGcast. For as little as $3 a month, you can be part of our family, and, that means, well, however you treat family, I guess, whatever. Anyway, this has been Copyright 2022 Pete in the Seat Studios. Thanks for hanging out, and may the force be with you.